Hello, everyone. We're the CYC Crickets, and the article that we're discussing today is called Children and Carers Perspectives of a Therapeutic Intervention for Children Affected by Sexual Abuse. So first I'm going to start off with who wrote the article. The title of this peer-reviewed article is Children's and Carers Perspective of a Therapeutic Intervention for Children Affected by Sexual Abuse. The authors of this article are Tricia Jessamine, Simon Hackett, and John Carpenter. Next, I'm gonna give a little bio of each author. So, Tricia Jessamine is a senior research associate in qualitative public health research with the University of Bristol, with expertise in commissioning, and managing programs of research as well as in participative methodologies. She has worked on a range of studies and evaluations involving children, young people, and families. Simon Hackett. Simon Hackett is an Australian technology entrepreneur. Simon attended the University of Adelaide, graduating with a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics and computer science in 1986. Simon is known for co-founding Internode Pty Limited, which is an Australian national broadband service company. And last, John Carpenter. John Carpenter has carried out research for the Department of Health and NHS on deinstitutionalization, community mental health services, violent mentally disordered offenders, and assertive outreach teams for the Department of Children, Schools, and Families, which is now the Department of Education for the last 35 years. Since 2012, John has been leading a team from Bristol and Durham universities evaluating the implementation, impact, and cost of a therapeutic intervention for children affected by sexual abuse and their carers. Next, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Vicky to go in depth of the article.
All right, thanks, Sheridan. I'll be talking about the purpose of our study. Now, I have a small note to make that according to the authors, it is an important aspect for us all to note that there's a range of studies involving children and carers' views to help us begin to fill gaps in understanding of how children and family members experience and perceive child sexual abuse interventions. However, in our chosen study, the overall aim was to provide further insights into the topic by introducing us into the experiences of those affected by child sexual abuse from the point of view of both the children and their carers. Particularly, their analysis was based on two questions, which I believe one of my teammates will expound on in a while. I'm also going to discuss the methodology that was used. The authors used the research methodology or approach to get their findings. They did a qualitative study by conducting in-depth interviews to collect data from children, young people, and carers affected by sexual abuse who had recently completed therapeutic intervention. These participants were randomly selected from centers where children had completed the interventions. Now, authors established in that study that it is important to get young people's views directly because many have different needs from those of their carers. And just as well, they established that carers' views were important since they're likely to influence children's access and attendance. So, Jasmine, you can take it from there, and thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. That was amazing. I'm going to dive into the next question that we had here. So what were the research questions they were trying to answer if it was a research article? So us as a group decided as we were reading the article, and we found some information on exactly the questions that they were wondering. So the first one would be the primary research question found in this article was, what do children, young people, and carers value about the therapeutic work undertaken with the following an experience of childhood sexual abuse? The other question would be, And what factors inhibit children and carers' satisfaction with therapy? So those were the two main research questions that they abide by as they did the paper. Another question that I have here under my other question would be, were there major problems you found in the article or the author's approach to researching the topic? I'm going to talk a little bit about this more, but I'm going to elaborate on it a little bit right now. During the paper, they talked a lot about young people and interventions, and they kind of gave carers and young people options on what kind of interventions they preferred and how much they satisfied them. One thing that I would like to see and wish I saw was them giving young people the option to choose and have the ability to make up interventions or give ideas. I didn't see that in the article. I think that would be really cool. I have another colleague talking a little bit more about that in a bit, but now I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Sully.
Hello, everyone. I'll be talking about the findings of this article. So the authors of this article have identified 4 overarching themes or findings. These themes are the attribution of the child's recovery to the therapeutic support that they received, the therapeutic relationship between the child and practitioner, the child's recollection of important aspects of the intervention, and the relationship between the carer and the child's practitioner. Going on to that first point, the children frequently reported low moods and withdrawal as a consequence to their experience. They've been described as scared, specifically to interact with others, and have, for the most part, internalized concerns that talking about their sexual abuse and its impacts would upset their carers. There are also common impacts amongst all the children in the study, which were reported, such as anger, anxiety, sleep disruption, self-harming behaviors, and suicidal thoughts. However, all the children in the study have mentioned that the interventions have helped. The children describe themselves as more confident and outgoing after these intervention sessions, and they have frequently used the word happier to describe their mood after their sessions. Carers often spoke about the relief they feel when the children began to understand that they were not to blame for the abuse. One of the characters described this as, quote, the most important lesson. Carers have also described feelings of guilt exacerbated by the negative experiences of having to deal with the situation, since there's a bit of a stigma surrounding being a victim of sexual abuse. For the second finding, all carers have mentioned that there is a value in the strength of the therapeutic relationship between the child and the child service practitioner, or in this case, CSP. Many carers mentioned that their child used the term best friend when referring to their CSP. A carer mentioned that they feel left out in some regard, though, since they're not present for the interventions and are not present for the interactions between their child and the CSP. However, they acknowledged that since their child was unable to open up to them, to care, about their sexual abuse, they were relieved to find that there is someone that the child is comfortable enough to talk to about it. And the children have mentioned that they valued the sense of control over what they did and did not talk about during their interventions. In the third finding, the children identified specific aspects of the intervention that were important to them. This initially had a focus on the process itself, the way the intervention was delivered. As mentioned earlier, the children valued the sense of control over what they did during the intervention sessions. A child had mentioned that when a topic of conversation was getting too difficult, her CSP would move on to something else that was a lot easier to deal with. one of the older children had mentioned that they valued the relaxation techniques that the CSP taught them in order to deal with their anger and anxiety, and this techniques were included a breathing exercise, which helped them calm down. One of the activities that a lot of the children described was an activity to create a letter or art piece dedicated towards their abuser. In most cases, the letters or the art / the art pieces were destroyed, and the participants of this activity described a sense of satisfaction when they destroyed the piece. One of the children commented that it showed him that his abuser no longer mattered. Quote. The children valued activities that address their feelings of guilt and blame. The CSPs focused some of their discussions around the circumstances surrounding the sexual abuse. And the children have described that the CSPs would challenge them every time they expressed feelings of guilt. This feeling of guilt was usually addressed towards the abuse or the impact of disclosure on the family. And finally, the fourth finding was for the fourth finding, many of the carers were reported to have been in contact with the CSPs in between intervention sessions. This contact was usually to discuss the child's behavior or mood, and in general, the carers had valued the advice and support that they received from the CSPs. And some of the CSPs have also liaisoned with the child's schools to negotiate additional support or to explain the child's challenging behavior. I'll now pass this off to my colleague Abby, who will be talking about the ideas that will help us in our future practice.
We found this article helpful and relevant for future practice because it informed us of symptoms and how sexual abuse can affect a young person. We also found it helpful to learn about the studies done that involved youth ages 5 to 16 that received psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Reading about the process of collecting data and in-depth reviews and the themes that emerged from these studies, including positive child recovery, therapeutic relationships that were gained, relationships between the child and youth care practitioners. Being able to understand these therapeutic approaches from the perspective of the youth helped us understand not only what we do and why we do it, but also how it affects the youth in their perspective. We found it useful to read about how interventions positively impacted the young person. For example, it helped with confidence, happier emotions, more of outgoing personality, improved sleep patterns, less physical symptoms. Their anxiety felt relieved and had a sense of control and self-identity. This helped us cement the importance of trust and safety aspect of the relationship as we child and youth care practitioners build with the youth. Now I'll pass it off to Jasmine.
Thank you very much, Abby. That was wonderful. I do have a next question I'll be talking about, and it's what I disagree with the article and why. And it's not that I disagree with anything, but I'd like to talk a little bit about what I said previously involving the children and youth and the carers and participants and how they involved people. It's not that I disagree with how they did it. It's that I wish that they did it in a different form or a different format. They did a lot of, asking and then the participants telling. I wish it was more of the participants asking and the researchers, doing the opposite. But I have a teammate who's going to discuss a little bit more about this in depth. So I'm going to pass it over to Joshin, and she's going to share with you guys a little bit more. Thank you.
As Jasmine just described, that we all would have preferred that if there was an added-on aspect to this where the youth got to choose the interventions that they would be taking part in. And also this research study has mentioned this, and this is something we found as well, that this study was conducted entirely with white youth. And even though the people who participate depends on who agrees to participate in the study, it would be beneficial to involve more people from and children from minority communities, from any person of color, because that adds a cultural aspect to the research, which is huge for our CYCP practice, as we try to be mindful of the cultural aspect when it comes to the trauma and neglect a youth faces. So this is what we would have liked this article to explore a little bit more. And for the last question, it was the relevance of this research paper to child and youth care practice. We believe that this article talks about the interventions used for the youth who have experienced sexual abuse and how those youth themselves experience those interventions. This research article discusses the perspective of the youth and what they think helped them and why they think that it helped them. And we as a group believe that the premise of this article is in congruence with the foundations of our practice, which is to put the youth first, understand where they're coming from, so we as practitioners can meet the youth where they are at. And this paper also talks about how the children valued being able to trust the practitioner, being able to feel safe around them. They mentioned that it was easier for them to trust, it was easier for them to feel safe because the relationship was confidential. And this takes us back to just recently that we have signed a confidentiality agreement regarding the youth that we've been assigned with, and even in placements for those who went to a 24/7 on any kind of environment where they had to sign confidentiality agreements surrounding their practice. And the children also said that the lack of coercion was also something that really helped them. And this is a huge aspect for us because, again, it takes us back to all our discussions and our book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Dr. Perry, where he mentions that the very first step into creating a therapeutic environment is to hand the control back to the youth. Because when somebody's going through trauma or sexual abuse or any kind of abuse, the primary feeling that they have is that of helplessness, and the loss of control. So it is very important that it is highlighted in this article. This to also quote our discussion we had last year with our guest speaker, Tom Garfat. He said that we don't want to control the children, we want children to control themselves. And this begins with letting them have control, letting them have choice over what they want to talk about, what they want to happen in their sessions. And in our contacts would be the programs that we as practitioners try to set up for them to build up on their skills. And this then links to our theories of doing with the youth and not to the youth or doing anything for them. So due to all these reasons, we believe this article brushes up on all the foundational aspects of forming relationships, building trust and safety with the youth, giving them choices, giving them control. And due to this, we believe it is extremely relevant with our practice as child and youth care practitioners. And that is all we had for the discussion for the day. We would like to end this discussion by adding on to our critical thinking question, which was, do you find the study and the interventions used in the study to be congruent with the CYC interventions, or do you find this particular study to be intrusive in any way? And what are some of the, if you do or you do not, what are some of the ethical concerns associated with this study that you can think of? So this is what we are going to leave you with. So we are the CYC Crickets. Comment your answers in the comment section below. Hit a like button, subscribe, and read the article. And we hope that it was a nice discussion for you all. Have a nice day.